So let me get that slides up, so just bear with me 1 second, please. So in this module, we will cover the firewall configuration. Well, I will cover what ports are needed for firewall configuration. Anyways, so and as you all probably hopefully know by now, is firewall blocks all incoming traffic, from the internet. That's what the idea is from it. So this, however, would not allow the 3CX server to have a proper two-way communications with external entities such as VoIP providers, remote extensions, remote PBXs, and vice versa. And for this reason, some configuration is required so that the firewall allows all the necessary internet traffic to reach 3CX server from the outside. Now, in order to fully understand the firewall section, unfortunately or fortunately, a fundamental knowledge of the network and routing is required. However, I will try to explain things in as simple possible way. But if you do want to try this out, you will need to have a configurable firewall. Firewalls can either be a physical device like an appliance of some sort, using, for example, the data router is a good example. It's got a router but also a very good firewall on it. Or it could be a software package that you can install on servers like Windows firewall or even Sonic Walls and also different things. But effectively, they both ultimately serve the same purpose. Throughout this kind of section, we will be going to through general configuration that needs to be done on 3CX. But what I'm not going to cover today is vendor-specific settings. And for this reason, you must know how to perform these settings on the hardware or the software of the firewall. No one from 3CX staff or from ProView staff will ever attempt to configure the firewall for you. You will need technical support from the actual vendor if you need to configure your firewall. 3CX do, however, have some sample configuration guides available as a reference. Some of the most popular ones are on the firewalls available in the market, like Sonic Wall and vice versa. There is a guide, so if you look at the links there, again, if you search on 3CX website, it talks you through different firewall options available on it. So NATs and ports. So effectively, one of the most important features of firewall, which we are going to talk about, is NAT, or in other words, what we call it is a network address translation. This is the way the firewall knows where to direct traffic from the outside world into the network when a certain external public IP address is contacted. This is required so that external entities like SIP trunks, 3CX applications, IP phones in a standard environment, SBCs, bridges can communicate with your 3CX server from outside your local LAN. Specific rules should also be set so that you can limit who can access the 3CX server through what is called ACL or access control list. Now, many firewalls require separate configuration of the access control list in order or in addition to the NAT configuration. So some firewalls automatically create these rules when the NAT configuration is done, but again, as I said, it depends on the firewall, as each firewall is effectively different. So you will probably have to consult documentation of your firewall for proper procedures to do that. IPv6 is another question which we do tend to ask by some people who are effectively trying to be fancy again. I still call it fancy because not many people are using IPv6 still in the lower market of the 3CX PBXs. So IPv6 again is supported, but IPv6 masquerading is not supported. You will need to create IPv6 firewall rules or access lists, we call it, for all the traffic to and from PBX, just like an IPv4 address. So if IPv6 is being, again, obviously if IPv6 is being used, the ports will still remain the same as IPv4, so the ports doesn't change much, even if you use IPv6. So the type of the network address translation that 3CX uses is something called full cone NAT. So a full cone NAT, in simple words, is where all requests from the same internal IP address and ports are mapped to the same external IP address and port. Now, furthermore, obviously, any external host can send a packet to the internal host by sending the packet to the mapped external devices. Most of the routers devices, as long as I'm aware, those support a full cone NAT, but there might be some available which doesn't support it. So make sure the router, the device you're using, has support for this. Now, this is also important for remote extensions, as the users may not have a static IP address at home, or if they are connecting on the go, like from their mobile devices factually. So especially when traveling, users do not need to communicate with the network admin beforehand to allow an IP address into the network. For example, 4G is one of the most notorious one. You would never, unless you have a very specific contract, you won't get a static IP address. So, and again, finding that static IP address on mobile network IP address is a bloody nightmare. I've tried it and it doesn't work easily. So the firewall should, again, the full cone NAT up actually allows access from anywhere on those specific ports, which we will cover shortly. Another important characteristic of the firewall, which you must have, and most of the firewalls have it, is port preservation. What this means is that when an entity or internal entity, let's call it, sends a packet to the firewall must allow this without changing the source port. Although this may sound like an obvious thing, a lot of firewalls have features like source port remapping, which just exactly this, purposely change the source port, IP port. Now, this is usually not a problem for other protocols, but unfortunately SIP and UDP or SDP are, SIP and SDP are kind of unique in this sense. To get a bit more technical on this, a lot of other protocols rely on the source port that is found in the transport header. So if this is changed by the firewall, that is okay. SIP, on the other hand, has port information inside the actual payload. I don't have a packet in front of me, but there's a payload section, and that contains all the information about connection IP address and what port to send the information to. So if that packet doesn't match, if the router obviously does what it does, but that payload header has a different port and IP address, and if they don't match, there's a high probability that you will have connectivity issues like one-way audio, no audio at all, or the calls even not connected. CPLG, effectively, this is probably another one of the most commonly commonly problematic issues or features on the routers. What it does is to try to look inside the SIP packet and alter the information. Although the intention of CPLG is good and it does try to solve some connectivity issues, our experience in general has shown that unfortunately not all implementations of CPLGs on the routers work reliably. So for this reason, we strongly recommend, if you know how to disable it, disable the CPLG on your device. Doing this can sometimes be a bit tricky, as I said, because there's no consistent pattern on how to do this. Most of these providers, for example, if I talk about some of the lower end of routers like Dratex, technical routers, they do disable this firewall feature by default. The firewall manufacturer documentation online to which hopefully may be able to help with this. Now let's have a look at a bit more specifically about the NAT ports needs to be open, depending on what external port, VoIP ports you are going to be effectively utilizing. Now, most of the ports we will mention, in this module can be changed. Again, I've covered that anyways during the installation process. You could change like port 5060 to SMU, UDP, or whatever. But I've obviously kept it quite simple. So let's talk about the basic elements of it as well. So SIP trunks are used in most of the deployments these days. You would expect that, which basically means is to use SIP trunks, you must open SDN. People tend to keep the default one unless so. Now this will allow the SIP signaling from your provider to reach 3CX. SIP signaling, however, does not contain the actual audio payload element of it. Audio uses a different protocol called RTP, or real-time transport protocol. It's a different set of or range of ports, which means you must also open UDP traffic for audio communication. Again, by default, this is set to 9,000 to 10,999. Now, this element you can't change. You can change the SIP ports, but audio change or audio traffic or audio ports UDP you cannot change on 3CX. Now, the audio payload could also contain video and fax traffic, as well as the audio calls through the web client. We will obviously see the specific ports for the web clients shortly anyways. If you intend to have a remote user working on either a 3CX app or an IP phone operating through the SBC, or even another PBX connected via bridge, then the port you also need to enable or open on your firewall is port 5090. Now for both TCP and UDP, unless change again during the installation process. There was obviously during the installation process, it did prompt me. I didn't change it obviously, so you can change it. The tunnel protocol encapsulates both SIP and audio packets, so only one port is required for calls to be made and the audio to be passed through. Now, it's really good in a way that it is a kind of VPN for, it acts as a kind of VPN for remote users in some time. So if you are using a mobile application on your smartphone, or if you're using a 3CX application on desktop and you are acting as a remote worker from 3CX point of view, all you have to do is really use open port 5090, and that will communicate via the SIP tunnel. It encapsulates, it kind of encrypts the traffic, so you get around a lot of SIP ALG problems using the terminal port as well. But at the same time, I'm aware that there are certain countries where the SIP traffic is either licensed or the SIP traffic by default is blocked. Even some in UK, that some of the providers block SIP traffic. So what it means is if you're using a mobile application, then it will most likely to work because it is encrypted traffic. SIP the mobile operators or any other countries where you're working where the SIP is blocked, they don't know what's going inside that packet, so you can still make an audio call to other countries. I know Chinese are a bit concerned about 5060, but I had customers who've been to China and they've successfully used 3CX applications in China and including UAE as well, like Dubai or Saudi Arabia and vice versa. Now, another port you have to open is a port 5001 TCP. Now, this port serves multiple different purposes. It can be used for provisioning, but it also be used for non-SIP information like presence information, provisioning information, company phone book. So all you have to do is really open 5000, and again at the same time you also use it for remote accessing the admin portal. So this is again by default is 5001, and the traffic, and all you have to do is open one port, which is the TCP element of it. Web meeting is another, again, kind of quite cool and great feature of the 3CX. It comes free of charge with even the free version of 3CX PBX. But in order to use this, you must allow outbound traffic to the web meeting server. Since this is not a single host, you will have to consult the web meeting manual in order to see which destination needed to be allowed. The manual, again, you can find it on 36 website, which is effectively 36.com/user manual web meetings /troubleshoot. Also, most firewall allow outbound traffic without any restrictions. I know for most of the house mini routers or home-based routers, or even some commercial routers like Data, for example, they allow outbound traffic without any restrictions, unless obviously you create specific rules or trying to make it as secure as you want. However, again, most of the corporate firewalls restrict outbound traffic, and so this traffic to the web meeting server will need to be allowed specifically. Now, in order for notification to reach your 3CX server from the web meeting server, you must ensure that your PBX HTTPS port is open for TCP traffic. Again, 5001, which we have covered before as well. Only do this configuration in the case where your firewall does restrict outgoing traffic. This is effectively I've only found it in a very strict kind of environment, especially in NHS, so government organizations, but most of the commercial organizations, they don't really block anything outbound. They do block incoming, because that's where the hack attacks come from mostly. External IP phones can be connected through an SBC to the PBX, but they also can be connected directly via stun. Okay, so in this case, the port that needs to be opened and forwarded are the PBX SIP ports must be forwarded effectively for TCP connection and UDP traffic, as well as the audio ports for the UDP traffic. Now, in addition to those, the HTTPS port will need to be opened for TCP traffic, which will allow the IP phone to retrieve information like the provisioning information and the phone number. Okay, the 3.6 web client uses similar ports. The communication is done via HTTPS, so the PBX secure port will need to be open. The port which is the web client uses for audio are 10,500 to 10,999 UDP. Now again, if you look at the the first initial two slides, the ports effectively are being reused. Mainly 4 to 5 different port level ranges. If you open those ports, you will be covered. 5090, 5060, 5001, and UDP 9,000 to 10,999, and that's all ports you need. But again, these are multi-purpose ports, which basically means we have to talk about it anyways to explain what these ports are doing. So effectively, if you open the ports in the previously UDP ports before or previously, no extra configuration is required at that stage. And again, this is something new recently, most in version 16. I think it's 4 or 5 going on. If you use Facebook messaging, SMS, or the 3.6 live website chat, you will also need to have a HTTPS port of the PBX open on the firewall. Again, the default one is 5001. You will have to enable it for remote dashboard management and vice versa. So it is a multi-purpose port again. So during the setup of the PBX, using the PBX configuration tool, which we have just gone through anyways, the browser port it uses is 5015 TCP. Okay, so let's say, for example, if you are performing this task on a remote network, maybe on Amazon Cloud or vice versa, and you need to have this port, you also need to have port 5000. Sorry, I've just gone through, I think, a couple of steps, perhaps. Yeah, sorry, that's the one. So, effectively, we have to open port 5015 TCP to be able to remotely access the PBX config tool, which goes through the installation process as well. Okay. HTTP is used in this case. Obviously, it uses the HTTP port, and SSL certificate has not been created just yet. So effectively, it's going to be, you have to open HTTP port 5000